In this lesson, we're going to look at using the Silhouette Cameo sketch pens to create our own stitching template. You can sketch your cut files onto your paper and then use those as a stitching line with a paper piercer and embroidery floss to make a cool design on your layout. So we have our laptop ready and we have our Silhouette Cameo. They're both connected, and so we're ready to get started cutting. I'm going to open up a cut file, so I'm going to go to the folder here to open, and I have it saved on the desktop. This is just the word hello. So I'm going to use this to create a stitching template for my background paper. So I have it open and I want to trace it, so I'm going to go to Object and Trace, and then I want to do Select Trace Area. Now I'm just going to use my mouse to highlight over the image, and then I'm going to check the high pass filter box to turn that off. And now I'm ready to trace, so under Apply Trace Method I'm going to click Trace, and this is going to give me the cut lines that I need. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to have this as a stitching template, and I'm also going to do it as a cut. So what I'm going to do is I actually want this pretty big, so I'm going to enlarge it and make it a little bit bigger here. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so I want to actually use this part to cut, and for the stitching template part I want to use the offset tool to make a little offset for this. So what I'm going to do is kind of get this lined up where I want it on my paper. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and kind of get it just right here. So what I want to do now is click on it, and I'm going to do offset right down here at the bottom of Silhouette Studio. And you can see that that gives me kind of just an outline around my cut file. I want that to be a little bit bigger. You can see right here it's on 0.125. I'm going to bump that up to 0.150 and see how it looks. So that's a little bit wider, and that's what I want to use. So what I'm going to do before I cut, I'm going to do the stitching template first. So I'm just going to move my word hello here to the side. And so I want to leave this here because this is where I want it to be on my background paper when I'm ready to stitch. So I'm going to add my white cardstock because this is going to be my background paper. And I'm going to put this on the mat and make sure I have it lined up. And so since we're doing a stitching template, I'm going to use one of the Silhouette sketch pens and take the blade out and just replace it with the pen. And you can use any color because it's going to be covered by your embroidery floss. A lot of times I like to use the silver pen just because it's kind of light, so you know for sure that it's not going to show through your thread. So we want to get that and then lock it into place. And now we want to go under Silhouette and do our cut settings. And I'm going to change this to the Silhouette sketch pen. And here we go right there. So now I'm going to load my mat into the machine. And we're ready to send. And this is just going to draw your image for you so that you can use it with a paper piercer and then to add in your embroidery floss. So you can see how quick that is. And now I have my word drawn on my paper. So I'm going to unload this. And before I get started on my stitching, I'm actually going to go back and cut the word hello from some pattern paper because I'm going to layer that in the center of the stitch word. So I'm just going to grab some pattern paper here, and I'm going to add that to my mat and load it back into the Cameo. And I want to make sure I switch out the sketch pen and add the blade in. And I know that for pattern paper I'm going to use the blade depth of 3, and this is already set to 3, so I'm going to go ahead and put the blade in. And now I just want to move the offset image out to the side, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to put this at the top because it doesn't have to be in the same spot as my stitching template was, because it can cut at the top because we're just going to remove it and add it to the background paper. So I'm going to go back under my settings, and I'm going to change it from the sketch pen to the pattern paper. There we go. And now I can send it to the machine. Once your image is finished cutting, you can unload it from the machine. And now you can see that you have the word hello cut from your pattern paper. So I'm just going to pull this off of my mat and show you what it looks like inside the offset image. And you can see here, once I have this pulled up, it's going to fit perfectly inside our stitching template. But I'm going to actually put this aside while we work on stitching, and then we'll go back and add that later. So now we're ready to get started stitching, and this is really easy. I like to use a paper piercer, and what I do is kind of just go around the image. So you've already got it drawn using your Silhouette Cameo sketch pen. So I just kind of take my paper piercer and kind of just eyeball it. I don't really measure, maybe about 1/4 of an inch. Just kind of go around your image and just get your holes punched. I'm just going to do a little bit here for you to show you how I kind of get started and get to a corner here. So I would really use my paper piercer to go around the whole image to poke the holes around the whole image and kind of trying to keep that same spacing just for consistency. And then what you want to do is I like to use the embroidery floss, and this usually has 6 strands of thread, and that's usually a little bit too thick for me. I don't like to use the full 6 strands, so I kind of just separate it into 3 strands. So you can just pull it apart, and it's going to give you a little bit thinner of a stitch on your page. So before I get started and thread my needle, I just pull that, and you can save this piece if you need it to continue your stitching or for a later project if you also need it for that. So now what we want to do is thread our needle. So I'm just going to grab our needle here and get our embroidery floss in. You may need to just kind of pull that a little bit just to get it to go through your needle. And so we're just going to do a basic back stitch on this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to come in from the bottom side through one of our holes. And we're just going to pull our embroidery floss through. And then we're going to come back over to the hole behind it and go back down. And we're just going to basically repeat that. Come up from the bottom and then go back down into your next hole. And what I did is I actually used 5 different threads to stitch each of the letters in the word. So I used orange on my first letter, and so I just got started with that and then continued this same stitch pattern just using different colors of embroidery floss around the word. And so you can just see how the embroidery floss is covering up the sketch pen mark so that you won't see that once your page is finished. And so once we had everything finished, once we finished all of our stitching, then we would want to take our cut that we did. And I actually added some dimensional adhesive behind mine. So you could use like the dimensional roller tape, you could use pop dots or anything like that. And so you just want to cut it and add it behind your cut file. I'm just going to add a few pieces here so we can look at that dimension. And it's going to give a little shadow that shows around your stitched image just to give that dimensional look on your page. And so we'll add one other little piece here, and then we just want to take off the backing. And then we can flip it over, and since it's cut perfectly to line up, we know that it's going to fit right here in our spot. So we can just kind of get that in place. And then you can see how it just kind of pops up off of the page. And you can see here on my finished layout the different colors that I used to have the orange and the yellow, a pink and a lighter pink, and then a teal color. And all these colors kind of pick up the colors that I used in my layout from the embellishments and the other pattern papers that I used.